Nobody was supposed to know about this meeting. Nobody was supposed to be talking about it. Nobody in the NFL world was supposed to be sitting in their offices and their production studios and their podcast recording rooms, dissecting what happened when Kevin Stefanski walked into a room with the Atlanta Falcons organization, and the conversation that followed started generating the kind of ripples that quiet meetings between serious football people always generate when the subject matter is significant enough and the stakes are high enough and the people involved are important enough that the football world cannot simply look away. But here we are. The meeting happened, the talk started, and right now, in Cleveland, in Atlanta, in every corner of the NFL that pays attention to the movements and the conversations and the behind-the-scenes developments that shape this league's future, the Stefanski and Falcons story is generating more discussion than anyone publicly wants to acknowledge. What was said in that room? What does it mean for Cleveland? What does it mean for Atlanta? And what does it mean for the future of a coach whose career just took a turn that nobody fully anticipated? Kevin Stefanski's journey through the NFL coaching world is one of the more compelling and more complicated stories of the modern coaching era. It is a story about a man who came up through the league the right way, through years of assistant coaching work, through the accumulation of experience across multiple offensive systems and multiple organizational cultures, through the specific kind of professional development that happens when you spend enough time in enough different football environments to develop a genuinely sophisticated understanding of what makes offenses work and what makes the people running them succeed or fail. It is a story about a coach who got his opportunity with the Cleveland Browns and did things with that opportunity that earned him the respect of the football world, even when the results were not what anyone in Cleveland had hoped for. And it is now a story about what comes next, about the specific professional moment that Stefanski finds himself in following his departure from Cleveland, and what the meeting with the Atlanta Falcons suggests about the direction that next chapter is going to take. To understand the significance of the Stefanski-Falcons meeting and why it is generating the conversation it is generating, you have to start by understanding who Kevin Stefanski is as a football coach and what he represents to the organizations that are evaluating him as a potential addition to their own football operation. Because the conversation around this meeting is not happening in a vacuum, it is happening in the specific context of what Stefanski built in Cleveland, what his departure from that organization revealed about the internal dynamics of the Browns' football operation, and what the organizations now interested in his services believe they are getting when they bring him into a room and have the kind of conversation that the Falcons just had with him. Stefanski arrived in Cleveland in January of 2020 as a coach with a strong reputation built through years of offensive coordinator work in Minnesota, where his work with Kirk Cousins and with the Vikings offense had demonstrated an ability to design and implement passing attacks that were sophisticated without being overly complex, that were creative without being gimmicky, and that could be adjusted and adapted in season in ways that reflected genuine offensive intelligence rather than a rigid commitment to a scheme that opponents could eventually figure out and neutralize. The Vikings, under his offensive coordination, were a team that could do multiple things well offensively. Run the ball when running was the right answer, throw it when throwing was the right answer, create explosive plays through scheme rather than just through athlete talent, and the ability to maintain that kind of offensive balance is a marker of high-level offensive coaching that teams looking for head coaches take seriously. His first season with the Cleveland Browns produced results that validated the reputation he brought with him. The Browns went 11-5 in 2020, their first winning record in years, and advanced to the playoffs for the first time in an even longer period, winning a playoff game in an environment that required genuine coaching preparation and genuine in-game management to navigate successfully. The city responded to that success with the specific kind of excitement that winning in Cleveland produces. Enormous because the waiting has been so long, and because the expectation of disappointment has been so thoroughly conditioned into the fan base that any genuine departure from that expectation feels almost disorienting in its pleasantness. Stefanski won the NFL Coach of the Year award for that season. The recognition was warranted. What he did with that Cleveland team in 2020 was genuinely impressive coaching work.
What followed was more complicated. The years after that initial success produced a record of results that was mixed in ways that reflected the genuine difficulty of coaching in Cleveland. The Deshaun Watson situation, the injuries, the roster volatility, the specific organizational dynamics that made sustained success harder to achieve than the initial breakthrough had made it appear. Stefanski remained in Cleveland through the full arc of those complications, coaching through circumstances that tested every dimension of his professional resilience and producing moments of genuine brilliance alongside stretches of genuine struggle. His relationship with the organization, with the front office, with the ownership group, with the players who came and went through the building during his tenure, was the relationship of a man who was genuinely trying to solve a genuinely difficult problem in a genuinely difficult environment, and who did not always have the resources or the circumstances to do it as completely as he wanted. When his time in Cleveland ended, it ended in the specific way that coaching tenures at struggling franchises typically end, not with a dramatic implosion or a public falling out, but with the quiet accumulation of results that had not met the expectations placed on them, and the organizational decision that a different direction was needed. The departure was handled with the professionalism that both sides of that relationship had demonstrated throughout, without the bitterness or the recrimination that some coaching departures produce, but also without the pretense that everything had gone as well as everyone had hoped. Stefanski left Cleveland as a coach with genuine credentials, genuine accomplishments, and the specific kind of professional credibility that comes from having worked at the highest level of the profession in a demanding environment, and having conducted yourself throughout with integrity and with genuine commitment to the work. The Atlanta Falcons, as an organization, came into the 2026 offseason with a set of needs and a set of questions that made Stefanski's profile genuinely interesting to them. The Falcons are a franchise in transition, a team with real talent at certain positions, with genuine questions at others, and with the specific organizational hunger of a franchise that has been close enough to genuine contention in the not-too-distant past to know what it feels like and to want that feeling back. Their offensive situation, the questions about scheme, about coordinator talent, about the specific ways in which the offense can be developed around their quarterback and their skill position players to create the kind of production that translates into wins, is the context in which the conversation with Stefanski becomes most immediately relevant. Because whatever else is true about Kevin Stefanski, the thing that is most consistently true about him is that he is a genuine offensive mind. Not in the abstract sense in which that phrase gets applied to almost every coordinator and head coach in the modern NFL, but in the specific, demonstrable sense that his offenses have consistently shown the kind of design intelligence and adaptability that distinguishes football coaching at its highest level from football coaching at its average level. The things he did with Cleveland's offense in the years when the pieces were available to him, the creativity of the formations, the diversity of the run game concepts, the specific ways in which he created mismatches and exploited defensive tendencies through scheme, rather than simply overwhelming opponents with talent, are things that the Falcons people studying his coaching history would have seen clearly in the film, and would have found genuinely compelling in the context of their own offensive questions. The first meeting between Stefanski and the Falcons was, by all accounts from people familiar with the situation, a substantive conversation rather than a preliminary courtesy call. This distinction matters in the context of how NFL organizations conduct their coaching searches and their organizational planning. Preliminary courtesy calls happen in this league constantly. Teams reach out to coaches, agents facilitate introductions, organizations maintain relationships with potential future partners in ways that are professionally appropriate but that do not carry immediate operational significance. Substantive conversations are different. They involve specific football discussions, scheme philosophy, personnel evaluation, organizational culture, the specific challenges and opportunities that the team presents, and how the coach being interviewed thinks about addressing them. The fact that the Stefanski-Falcons meeting was characterized as substantive by people with knowledge of it is the first and most important piece of information about what the meeting means. The substance of what was discussed, to the degree that it has been communicated through the various channels that NFL information travels, touched on several areas that are directly relevant to the Falcons' current organizational priorities.
The offensive philosophy discussion was apparently deep and detailed, covering not just Stefanski's general approach to designing and running an NFL offense, but his specific thinking about how the principles of his offensive system would apply to the personnel the Falcons currently have, and the personnel they are in the process of acquiring. This kind of specific, applied conversation, where a coach is not just explaining his philosophy in the abstract, but is demonstrating how that philosophy would interact with the specific realities of a specific football team, is the conversation that moves hiring discussions from the preliminary stage to the serious stage. The Falcons wanted to understand not just what Stefanski believes about offense, but what he would do with their offense. And the conversation they had with him, according to those familiar with it, gave them meaningful information about both. The quarterback dimension of the conversation is the one that has generated the most significant outside reaction and the most substantive discussion in the NFL world. The Falcons' quarterback situation is a subject of genuine organizational importance, a question that intersects with every other decision being made about the roster, the scheme, the coaching staff, and the long-term direction of the franchise. Stefanski's background, his work with multiple quarterbacks at different stages of development, his ability to design offensive systems that are adaptable to the specific strengths of the quarterback running them, rather than requiring the quarterback to conform to a predetermined system, is directly relevant to the Falcons' quarterback questions. The conversation that took place between him and the Falcons organization about how he thinks about developing and deploying quarterbacks at this stage of the NFL's offensive evolution is one that the organization needed to have with serious people, and the Stefanski meeting gave them that conversation with someone whose credentials on the subject are genuine and whose perspective is informed by real experience rather than theoretical framework. The reaction from the broader NFL community to the news of the Stefanski Falcons meeting came from several directions simultaneously and painted a picture of how this situation is being understood by the people who follow these things most closely. From the coaching community came a general acknowledgement that Stefanski's profile made him a logical conversation partner for teams with offensive questions, that his work in Cleveland, taken in its totality and evaluated honestly, represented a coaching career with enough genuine accomplishment to make him attractive to organizations looking for experienced offensive leadership. From the front office community came a more analytical response, an evaluation of what Stefanski's presence would mean for the Falcons' organizational architecture, for the relationship between the head coach and the general manager, and the specific way that organizational decision-making authority would be distributed in a scenario where Stefanski was operating in a significant role. And from the fan communities, both in Cleveland and in Atlanta, came the emotional response that any significant coaching development involving a well-known figure always generates. The Cleveland dimension of the reaction is worth examining specifically, because in Cleveland, the news of Stefanski's meeting with another organization, of the coach who led the Browns through one of the more significant recent chapters of their franchise history, now being considered for a significant role elsewhere, landed with a specific kind of emotional complexity. There are Browns fans who have complicated feelings about Stefanski's tenure, who believe that the results did not fully reflect the quality of the coaching, that the circumstances of the Watson situation and the roster volatility and the organizational dynamics that he was operating within were factors that made fair evaluation of his coaching work genuinely difficult, and who feel a measure of loyalty and appreciation for what he gave the city during his time there. There are other Browns fans who have simpler feelings, who believe that the results were the results, and that the departure was the right decision, and that what happens to Stefanski professionally from here is interesting, but not particularly personal. Both of these responses are honest expressions of genuine feelings about a complicated situation, and both of them are understandable in the context of what Cleveland has been through with its football team over the years. The Atlanta dimension is equally worth examining. The Falcons fan base, which has its own complicated history of close calls and painful near misses, and the specific weight of the 2017 Super Bowl that produced one of the most devastating losses in championship game history, is processing the Stefanski news through the lens of their own franchise's current moment. They are looking at what their team needs, at what Stefanski represents as a potential addition to the organization, at what his presence would mean for the offensive development of their quarterback, and the overall direction of a team that believes it has the pieces to compete for a championship if the right organizational structure and the right coaching are in place around those pieces.
The conversation the Stefanski meeting has started in Atlanta is a serious football conversation about serious football questions, and the fact that it has started publicly suggests that the organization is not trying to manage this story into quiet resolution, but is allowing the process to develop in the open in ways that reflect genuine organizational confidence in their direction.
The broader NFL significance of the Stefanski Falcons meeting goes beyond the immediate question of what role Stefanski might play in Atlanta and what that would mean for both organizations involved. It touches on the larger question of how the NFL coaching market values experience and resilience, how organizations think about coaches who have been through difficult tenures and who have come out of those tenures with their credibility intact, who have learned from the experience of coaching in challenging circumstances in ways that make them better prepared for the next opportunity than they were for the one that did not go as planned. The NFL is full of coaches who had difficult stretches at some point in their careers and who went on to achieve significant success in subsequent situations. The game has a long memory for failure, but it also has a genuine appreciation for coaches who demonstrate the kind of professional character that survives adversity and produces growth rather than bitterness. Stefanski's willingness to engage seriously with the opportunities in front of him, to bring his full professional self to the conversation with the Falcons, and to have the kind of substantive discussion that serious football organizations want to have with serious football coaches is itself a statement about the kind of professional he is and the kind of contribution he believes he can still make to an NFL organization. The talk that the first meeting sparked is not going to quiet down quickly. The specific combination of factors that make this story interesting, the high-profile coach, the historically significant franchise, the specific organizational questions that the meeting was designed to address, the Cleveland connection that adds an emotional dimension to what would otherwise be a purely professional conversation, ensures that the coverage and the commentary and the speculation will continue as the situation develops. What the next meeting produces, what the organizational process that the first meeting set in motion eventually concludes, and what role, if any, Stefanski ultimately plays in the Falcons organization are questions that will be answered in the weeks ahead. But the conversation that the first meeting started, the genuine, substantive, football-serious conversation about an experienced coach and an organization with real needs and real ambitions finding each other at a moment when both have something meaningful to offer, is the kind of conversation that the NFL's offseason is built on, and this one is bigger than most. The football world is watching. Cleveland is watching, with its complicated feelings about a coach who gave the city something real during a period when real was hard to come by. Atlanta is watching with the specific expectation of a fan base that believes its team is close to something significant and is evaluating every organizational development through the lens of whether it brings that something closer or pushes it further away. And Kevin Stefanski is navigating his next professional chapter with the same deliberateness and the same commitment to doing things the right way that has always defined how he operates in this league. The first meeting with the Falcons has sparked big talk. The talk is warranted, and the story it is the beginning of is one that the NFL is going to be following closely for a long time. First meetings in the NFL coaching world are rarely just first meetings. They're the beginning of processes that shape franchises, define careers, and sometimes change the trajectory of organizations in ways that the participants cannot fully anticipate when they sit down in the same room for the first time. The Stefanski Falcons' first meeting has sparked big talk because big talk is warranted. The stakes are real, the people are serious, and the story is just beginning. Disclaimer: based on publicly available reports, NFL coaching news, and ongoing developments as of April 2026, internal meeting details drawn from industry reporting and have not been independently verified, for entertainment and informational purposes only.